Hey guys, welcome back to Chaos Core Tech. My name's Garrett, and today we are going to be making Frank from Sausage Party. Let's get into it. I created this model in Fusion 360 and mostly using the sculpting environment. This was one of the first models that I ever really did like a full face in sculpting. I didn't sketch most of the details on, like the eyes were fully sculpted, and that was something I hadn't really done a lot before. And mostly how I achieved that was I kind of imprinted the area that I wanted the eyes to be, and then I just kept adding more subdivisions along the area there, so I had more detail that I could play with, and that allowed me to get the eye shapes that I wanted. And once I did that, I came back out and went to my trusty sketches for the mouth and the eyebrows, and then I went back to the sculpting environment to sculpt the arms, the hands, the legs, and the feet. And this is actually how I make most of my hands in Fusion. I create separate pieces for all of the fingers and the hands, and that just makes it a lot easier to move them around and sort of position them to get the right thing. It always results in a very cartoony hand, but in this case that works out pretty well. And I just copied one of the arms and started moving it to get the different position there. Same kind of concept with the legs. It works pretty well just to create a cylinder and start moving it around, especially for tiny limbs like that. And I don't have any print footage because of the SLA. It has a black chamber, so you can't see in there. But after I printed it out on my Nobel 1.0A, I handed it over to my wife for printing, and she didn't have to do hardly any sanding. There was a little bit where the supports were. My wife mostly used acrylic paints and paintbrushes to paint this. She said the hot dog color was kind of a weird color to get. She had to mix a ton of different colors to get it, but she finally did. It looks awesome. And she had to use a ton of tiny paintbrushes because I printed this thing so small, just because I wasn't sure how much resin I had left. But she did an amazing job, and those tiny paintbrushes really come in handy for those where the limbs connect and stuff like that. So she just went around and started with the main body color, then painted on the shoes and then the arms and the legs. And I believe she went back over the hands with white, even though the primer was white, just to give it a little bit nicer of a finish. And she also grabbed a really tiny paintbrush to do the face details. And with all that, we are left with the finished Frank. Well, there you have it. I'm super happy to get this one done. I've actually been working on this for a long time, and by that I mean I started this a long time ago. Actually, when Sausage Party the movie came out, my wife and I saw it in theaters. It was super funny. And actually, kind of a funny story about it. I had heard from everyone that it was like the raunchiest, most vulgar animated thing ever. And my wife and I were watching it, and throughout the entire movie we're just like, okay, sure, it's raunchy, but it's not that bad. And compared to like some of Seth Rogen's other stuff that we normally watch. And then the last like 10 minutes sets in, and we know why people say that now. So parents, if you're sitting there thinking that this guy's pretty cute and your kids might like this, steer clear. This is not a children's animated movie. So anyway, I created this model back then, and I actually could not get it to print on my FDM machines just because these legs and arms are so tiny. I tried scaling it up to very close to 200 millimeters high, which is the biggest that my printer can go, and I actually even tried to break him up at one point to get it to print, and the limbs were just too tiny and I could just not get it to print well. My wife probably could have fixed some of the stuff in post-processing, but I didn't really want to pass the model along to you guys, didn't have the same issues. But with the Nobel using SLA technologies, I was finally able to print this guy, and look how tiny he is. These limbs, the arms and the legs, are just over 2 millimeters thick. That is insanely tiny, and they're actually pretty flexible, and they have flexed quite a bit while we've been using them, and they show no signs of breaking or anything like that, holding up really strong. And I am just insanely impressed with this. And like I said earlier, Chelsey barely had to do any sanding. It was just to remove a little bit of residue from the supports. So this should really go to show you the power of SLA. And I will likely have my review of this printer up in the next week or so, maybe 2 weeks. But what I can tell you now is that if you're curious about SLA, you should probably do it. I know it's expensive, but I've been absolutely floored by this. I am just kicking myself that we didn't do it earlier. And especially where most of the stuff that we do doesn't need to be functional or anything like that. It's all about surface finish. And if you print models like that, then SLA is definitely for you, where you need lots of tiny little details and it just needs to look great. And you don't want to sand a ton. Now that being said, there is a lot of stuff on the functional side of SLA that I haven't had a chance to test just because I didn't have a ton of resin to mess with this type of stuff. And it seems like you can get some pretty strong parts, but hopefully in the future I will get my hands on another SLA printer and be able to test things like strength, and then I can give a better recommendation. But for the time being, if you're doing things like this, SLA is definitely the way to go, if you can afford it. That's the one unfortunate thing, is it is just super expensive. And if I wasn't doing this for YouTube and sharing it with you guys, I honestly don't think I could justify the added cost for this type of stuff. But fortunately, I am doing it for YouTube and you guys, so I can justify it. My wallet doesn't like it, but I like the end result. And also, hashtag save the fingers for my wife. This has just been amazing, especially since this time of year is her busiest time of the year. So the less time she can spend sanding, the better. Okay guys, well thank you for watching. If you like Sausage Party, leave a like, let me know down in the comments, because I can definitely do more of these types of characters in the future. There's a ton more from the show, so just let me know down in the comments. And of course, as always, there are links down in the description for the files to print this for yourself. Like I said, FDM is a little rocky with this guy, but if you have SLA or something that can do really small things, give it a shot. And you'll also find some links to the full modeling video and the full painting video if you wanted to see those in more detail. Alright guys, thanks for watching, and until next time, keep creating.